Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher, and I specialize in PCOS, women's health, and fertility. And today I had the lovely opportunity to interview Melissa Groves Azzaro, also known as the Hormone Dietitian. And she was gracious enough to answer all of the questions that you all submitted. If you didn't have a chance to submit a question, no worries. There were so many that there's a really good chance that something that you might be curious about was answered in today's interview. After you watch the interview, make sure to head down to the description box below and check out the links that I have down there for you, because you'll find links to her webinar, her course, her book, and her website. So many wonderful things. Oh, and this wonderful quiz that she has that'll help you identify what might be driving your PCOS symptoms. So I don't want to use up any more time because there's so much goodness in this interview. So let's get right to it. Hi there, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So excited to chat with you, as always.
It's always a pleasure. Always, always. So we have quite a few questions to get through that people submitted. But before we get to their question, I have a couple that I would love for you to answer.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. So my first question for you is, how did you end up in this world of like PCOS and hormones and nutrition?
Yeah, kind of crazy. Definitely like a roundabout story. So I majored in dance and English the first time around, which naturally led to getting a job in pharmaceutical advertising in, in New York City. Um, so I was working in New York, and it was, highly scientific. So I never really knew that I liked science until I was, learning it and doing it. And was burning out. It was, advertising in New York in general is just go, go, go. And I was traveling a ton and just, really like my physical and mental health was really, suffering because of it. I was working 90 plus hour weeks, some weeks, and I started to, plot my escape from advertising. And I realized that, I had 4 bookshelves full of books about food politics and, cookbooks and food justice and all of the things that I had been interested in. And so I was thinking, well, what would it take? What would it really take to go back? And so I went back and I got my degree at 40 and did the whole internship, became a dietitian. So I had always been, interested in more alternative, natural ways of health. And so, functional medicine was what drew me. And my one of my first jobs was working in the office of a functional medicine practitioner. And so they, as the newbie, they sent me anyone who wanted to lose weight. It was like, which is basically the majority of people who call a dietitian's office. They want to lose weight, so they come in. Um, and with functional medicine, what we're doing is we're looking for the root cause of the symptoms. And so, weight or inability to lose weight. I mean, you're looking at what they're eating and how much they're exercising, and it's like something's not really adding up here. And when we do the deeper digging in terms of lab testing and whatnot, there would always be some sort of hormone imbalance. So, whether it was low thyroid or high insulin or high cortisol, or this condition that I had never heard of called PCOS. And so when I started working with, women who had PCOS, and I just started getting really angry. you know, just like so angry about the way that the condition is treated by conventional medicine. And it's just so much blame is placed on the women. It's like you're eating too much, you're not exercising enough. It's like, no, it's the hormone imbalances. Like you could literally be doing everything you possibly can, but those hormone imbalances are gonna prevent you from whatever results you're trying to attain. So yeah, so when I spun off and opened my own practice, I decided that that was what I really wanted to focus on. I mean, it's a pretty niche market, but approximately 10% of women. So, pretty big significant chunk of people that, I really figured I could help, really do my best to actually give them information that helps and not the usual here's the pill, here's come back when you're ready to start getting pregnant. Um, so yeah, sort of my mission to empower women with PCOS to know that there are other choices for them.
I love that mission. I love it. I love it. So you touched on this a bit. You touched on that there's a conventional approach to managing PCOS and there's more of a root cause approach, which is your approach. Can you help us better understand like what's the difference between those two ways of managing PCOS?
Yeah, so a conventional approach to treatment would be I have acne. I'm going to go to the dermatologist. I'm going to get a cream to put on the acne. I'm going to try to cover it up and take care of it from the end. Whereas functional medicine, I'm thinking, well, what's causing that acne in the first place? Is it high androgens? Is it a gut imbalance? Is it inflammation? Which hormone is imbalanced? Because then when you're working higher up on those root causes, and the root causes are common to all of the symptoms that can possibly express. I mean, PCOS is a syndrome, which is basically a collection of symptoms, and it presents different in every person who has it. Um, so, really figuring out for that person what the root causes that are driving their symptoms are, because if you address those, then all of those little symptoms start to get better.
I love that. Okay, cool. So that actually, I think it leads us into our very first question from the community. And that first question is, can PCOS be reversed?
I get a lot of questions about this as well, and technically, no. There's no cure for PCOS, and any influencer who's telling you there is, just run the other direction. What can happen, and what I see happen quite often, is that when all of those things are kind of under control, then you no longer meet the clinical definition for diagnosis of PCOS. Because if you all of a sudden you're getting regular cycles and there's no cysts on your ovaries and your androgens are balanced, then you're not going to meet that threshold for a PCOS diagnosis. But because it's a chronic condition, um, that tendency is always going to be there. So you always have to act like it could come back at any second.
That makes so much sense because I think people get confused when they are making changes that lead to them no longer having the symptoms. And they feel like, well, I don't have the condition, it's been cured. But what you're saying and what we know is that it's a chronic condition. And so if you don't stick with those changes, you'll once again experience those symptoms. So it's always there, kind of in waiting. Yeah.
Yeah, like any chronic condition, like
Hmm.
type 2 diabetes, or, it can be managed and you can live a relatively symptom free life with the condition, but know that it's always there kind of lurking.
Got ya, got ya. So how long should someone stick to changes before expecting to see improvements? And then once they see the improvements, how long do they need to continue with those changes?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what the symptoms are. Um, in terms of any sort of like hormonal imbalances or hormone caused symptoms, I tell people generally to expect at least 2 to 3 months to start seeing changes. It takes a long time to shift hormones. Hormones are kind of the last bit to shift. So, working on those other things like insulin resistance and gut health and inflammation, that's going to help those hormone changes happen. It really kind of also depends on the symptom. Some symptoms I find will clear up pretty quickly, like for the most part, when people start balancing their blood sugar, their energy, comes back pretty much right away, or they're sleeping better, or, they're having fewer cravings, their skin starts to clear up and look brighter. Um, Anything involving, and this is the saddest part for PCOS, and I know this is the part that like really women care about so, so much. Anything involving a hair follicle can take, I mean, a year of consistent action before you even start to notice a difference. And that's just the nature of, hair follicles have a life of their own. Once they're engaged in doing what they're doing, that's what they're doing. Once they stop doing what they're doing, it takes a little while to wake them back up again. So yeah, hair growth or hair loss can take a while of being consistent to shift. Um, you know, Back to the it's a chronic condition, you really don't want to stop with the changes that you've made, which is why it's so important that whatever you're doing has to be something that you can live with for a lifetime. It has to be sustainable because you're in this for the long haul. I'm always telling people PCOS is a marathon, it's not a sprint, you know.
Yeah. I feel like that message can't be preached enough because I remember going even onto Amazon and looking at people's reviews of certain supplements that have been recommended for PCOS and supplements that I've recommended. And I've seen people in the reviews say, like, I've been taking this for 2 weeks and it didn't work, like giving it 1 star. And I'm just like, wow, I think we need to start talking about how long it's going to take for you to see a difference. It's not like a round of antibiotics that you take for 10 days and then it's all better. It's something that's ongoing. Consistency and patience are definitely needed.
I tell people, with my course is 6 weeks, and I'm good, but I'm not going to get you 100% better in 6 weeks. So, you should notice enough improvements after a certain point to know that you're on the right track and to keep going with it for sure.
Okay, so our next question. So this person describes themselves as being at a normal weight, and they're wondering how important is it for them to go gluten-free or dairy-free?
What's negative 100 on a scale of 1 to 100. There's literally no evidence that avoiding gluten or dairy is necessary or beneficial for PCOS. I mean, if you search the literature for gluten plus PCOS, there's zero studies. I do find a lot when I'm working with someone who has, quote unquote, lean PCOS, meaning they're, at an ideal body weight according to BMI, if you put any stock in that. But someone for whom weight is not a problem for them, when they have PCOS. I usually find those women are being much stricter than they have to be. Um, I know, especially because that specific type of PCOS tends to be driven more by the adrenals and the adrenal
Mm,
imbalances. And so, I find women in that state are sort of following all the instructions they read on the internet, cutting carbs, cutting sugar, cutting all the things out, and it's just not necessary. So, oftentimes we work on adding some of that back, adding in good quality carbs like sweet potatoes and brown rice and regular pasta, eat regular pasta. Um, and the adrenals really need carbs. Adrenals like carbs. So you gotta feed them good quality carbs. And then all of a sudden you're sleeping better and you're less anxious. And it's just kind of amazing. So yeah, I don't recommend cutting foods at all. At
love
all.
that.
0.
Right, and it's for any body type. Like, it's not just if you're within the normal range. Like, no one needs to go gluten-free or dairy-free as, like, the first step. If someone has a sensitivity or an allergy, clearly, but that's a very different issue than PCOS.
Absolutely. And it's so hard to cut out foods. if you don't have to. And I think, a lot of it depends on where you live in the country and what you have access to. It depends on what your budget is. I mean, I don't know about you, but like if I buy gluten-free tortillas, they are like 7.99 for like six little, yeah. No. Like why would you do that if you don't have to? Um, and it's just, you know, nutritionally, the gluten-filled options are often better for you than the gluten-free ones. I mean, if you do a side-by-side comparison of gluten-free bread to a whole wheat bread, I mean, just the amount of fiber is, staggering the difference. So, yeah, not necessary. And then there's also benefits. There actually are proven benefits of including full fat dairy for fertility, for example. So, yeah, if you're eating an ounce of cheese a day, like that did not cause your PCOS, it's not responsible for it. Keep eating the cheese if that's what's going to, keep you off the ledge. Basically, eat the cheese. Eat the cheese. Why?
Good, good, good. Good to know. Okay. So, what are your thoughts about the birth control pill? It's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, it has a time and place. It's a super effective form of contraception. Great. I think most women have been on it at some point, myself included. It's for contraception. It's not for treatment of hormonal imbalances. So, it's going to cover up some of the symptoms. It's going to make some of the symptoms better because when you're taking all that synthetic estrogen, it makes your liver make more sex hormone binding globulin, which does exactly what it sounds like it does. It binds on to those sex hormones. And so when your sex hormone binding globulin goes up, it binds to your testosterone, which causes your testosterone symptoms to go down. So it does. It kind of covers it up. It's not by any means treating the underlying root causes.
Yeah. So, for someone who has decided that the birth control pill is something that they'd like to use, what can be done to offset some of the negative side effects of using the pill?
I think, primarily taking a good multivitamin, just to kind of cover your bases because the pill can cause some nutrient deficiencies. Just being aware that it may take a little while after you go off the pill to regulate again. Being aware that symptoms can come sort of rushing back with a vengeance after going off the pill, especially, hair loss and acne can kind of come whooshing back. So just, kind of being aware of that. But, it's a personal decision. And, if that's what you are doing right now, then, it's totally fine.
Yeah. Can you make the other changes while being on the pill?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually don't do hormone testing while someone's on the pill because it's going to skew so many of the results. But in terms of all of the other things that you could be working on, like balancing your blood sugar and lowering inflammation, working on gut health, getting enough fiber and colorful fruits and veggies, like all of those things, they're not going to hurt for sure. It's just that one little piece of the puzzle, the hormone piece that, is kind of on pause while you're on the pill.
Yeah. And so, for someone who has insulin resistance, what should they be focusing on to improve that insulin sensitivity and blood sugar balance?
Yeah. So I know we're not big fans of like food rules, right? Like, not a fan of like, don't do this or do that. My one rule, if because some people need to hear the negative, like, don't do this. My one thing is do not eat carbs by themselves. Always the flip side being always pair carbs with protein, fat, fiber to slow down their effect on your blood sugar and your insulin as a result. So, it's really really the one thing. It's like and I know I'm guilty of it too, and I'm really busy and I'm just starving and I'm just like, I'm just going to shove a handful of crackers in my face. It's like, no, take the extra 2 seconds, go get yourself a cheese stick or a handful of almonds to balance out the crackers. I know it's counterintuitive when it's like, oh, you're eating more food, but the goal is the blood sugar balance, not the calories, for sure.
Very helpful. Okay. Let's see. What's our next question? Which supplements balance hormones?
Wow, which hormones? That's my question. Which hormones? There are some supplements that effectively balance hormones, but it depends really what the hormone imbalance is that we're talking about. I actually will not recommend any supplements that will directly affect a hormone without having done thorough hormone testing on that person. Because if we're guessing and we're giving them the wrong thing, it can actually make the situation worse. So, I really don't recommend hormone balancing supplements. I am not a fan of those. You know, PMS or hormone balance supplements that are out there. I have seen far too many women taking the wrong thing for their situation.
I'm with you. Definitely seen that. I had a client who had high DHEA, and her provider had just put her on DHEA because she was over a certain age and undergoing IVF. And I was like, that's just what we do. And I was like, not for someone who it's already high for. Like, we really do need to know what's going on in order to know how to address it. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and similarly, I've had women, taking DIM or something, and they're, complaining about night sweats and hot flashes. And I'm like, you are throwing yourself into menopause with this dose of DIM that you're taking that you don't need because your
Yeah,
estrogen is not high. For sure.
absolutely.
There's so much DHEA is a really big one though that I see, just sort of tossed around in fertility communities as and it's such a high dose that's recommended. You know, the fertility dosing is 25 milligrams 3 times a day, so 75 a day. I obviously have worked with thousands of women. I will say I've put 3 on DHEA supplements
Wow.
in the history of working with women for fertility, and they've all been over 40. And I start them at 5 milligrams, you know,
Yeah.
and then we see how they do.
Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
I feel like when someone asked this question, they had also added a piece on Vitex, but I didn't include that. So, what are your thoughts on Vitex?
Yeah, Vitex is one. It's not a cure-all, it's definitely potent. I use it in certain situations. I use it if someone has high prolactin, I'll use Vitex. I will use Vitex to jumpstart ovulation over the short term. Like if we've done, say, we've been working together for 3 months and we've done all the things and we've balanced the blood sugar and we lowered the inflammation and that period's still not coming back, we'll use Vitex there to it's like, okay, we're doing everything. We just need to, because what Vitex does is it establishes that communication between your brain and your ovaries. So we just kind of like jumpstart it to get it talking to each other. And then I'll use Vitex in someone like me who is, 44 and my progesterone's on the low side and I'm super on top of my cycles. So I only take it from ovulation until my next period to sort of boost the progesterone. So I use Vitex, with PCOS, I use Vitex very short term, just kind of as a jump start.
I'm happy you brought up progesterone because that's actually our next question. How do you naturally increase progesterone?
Oh, this is the part everybody hates. When stress goes up, progesterone goes down. So, I mean, unfortunately, with progesterone, it's a hard one because it really is that lifestyle stuff that you have to work on. You have to be getting enough sleep. You have to be actively managing your stress. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I think I don't know. I kind of wonder if I were to move to a cabin in the woods where I never had to talk to anyone, going back to talking about not answering my phone, like if I never had to talk to anybody, maybe my progesterone would be okay because my stress would even out. Um, but progesterone is one of those things where, the ends kind of justify the means, and it's really kind of a quick fix. And it's such an important one for early pregnancy that, if you are trying to get pregnant and your progesterone is low, like it's generic, it's natural, it's easy, like go to your doctor and get a prescription for it because if that can prevent you from going through the heartbreak of a miscarriage, that was $7 a month well spent.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you said that because I feel like there's often this either or approach that people take. They think that if they're working on things naturally, they're working with a dietitian, maybe they're working with a naturopath. They don't think that they can also use the conventional means to support themselves. And you really can turn to both. And I think both is sometimes what people need.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize, with progesterone, especially, I don't know how effective we're all just kind of doing the best we can when it comes to stress management. I don't know how it really depends if you're like super, super committed and you want to, move to that cabin in the woods while you're working on it. Like, all power to you. But in the meantime, let's not have you have to go through a miscarriage, you know?
Agreed. Agreed with you. Okay. So our next question, what role does CBD play in balancing hormones and PCOS?
Oh, that's kind of a fun one. I'm a fan of CBD. I mean, I think there's not a heck of a lot of research out there on it yet. That will change because the laws recently changed, so there'll be more research allowed on it, and I would love to see more specific research in PCOS. Janice Newell Bissix is a dietitian. She is Janabis, and I've seen her present a few times on CBD and its uses for health. And one key takeaway from or the presentations of hers that I've seen is that CBD is anti-inflammatory, which sounds amazing because PCOS, a lot of women with PCOS struggle with inflammation. Um, the counterpart to that is that THC is pro-inflammatory. So you want to be doing, a THC free or as free as possible if you're using CBD. There's plenty of good companies out there, with high quality CBD. You want to make sure it's organic and US grown and all the things. But yeah,
Hmm.
I'm a fan. I mean, also I think with mental health being such a key part of PCOS as well. So many women are struggling with, depression or anxiety or insomnia or other sleep problems. CBD again, it's kind of a low risk way to help.
Yeah, I had no idea about the THC being pro-inflammatory, so good to know. Really
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah, also, kind of get to I always like to bring up when we're talking about fertility, and couples working together, what your partner is doing also matters. So you want to make sure that if he is doing something that actively destroys sperm, that he's eating a lot of vegetables and fruits to counteract that damage.
Very good tip.
I see so many women who are like taking all the supplements and doing all the things, and then it's like their husbands come home from work and have like a six pack and smoke. So yeah, takes two. Takes two to think.
Definitely. Okay, so what tests do you recommend to understand the root cause? And for someone who's been doing lots of testing, when do you recommend they stop the testing and just work on what they've already gathered?
Yeah, some basic testing. I mean, the diagnostic testing that your doctors will do. to see what your DHEAS is doing. That's, an androgen that comes from your adrenals, what your testosterone's doing, what your sex hormones are doing. You can kind of gauge where your fertility is at the moment. For insulin resistance, I like to I find the most straightforward way to do it is to look at fasting glucose and fasting insulin at the same time, because then you can calculate what's called a HOMA IR, which shows you where you are on that insulin resistance spectrum. And that's really cool. I like to monitor that and see that go down, because that will go down pretty quickly. For inflammation, I like to take a peek at HSCRP. It's probably the most widely used one. For hormones, I use the Dutch test because, it looks at things that standard blood tests don't look at. So, um, it really helps us figure out how much of your androgens are coming from your ovaries versus your adrenals. Helps us see what your adrenals are doing, like what's going on with your cortisol and stuff too. Um, so those are basically the tests I recommend. And pretty much just kind of, start working on them immediately if you find out that, some of these things are a problem for you. In terms of retesting, you can retest glucose every 3 to 6 months. I mean, it's a pretty non-invasive one. I usually don't recommend redoing a Dutch test because it's expensive, and usually, um, the changes that you make, you're going to feel so much better that you're going to know it's working. Inflammation, you could do, yearly when you do your like cholesterol panel, like the basic blood work stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so we're nearing the end. How do you work out without increasing stress hormones?
Thought you were asking me how I work out. Um, how I work out, well, I really didn't for a long time. Um, no, we got a bike. We got a Nordic track bike in November, or no, July, because it was 90 degrees here. So it was like, I'm not walking, I'm not doing anything. Like, I need to do something. How do you work out without increasing stress? Well, it really depends on the person. And I think there's a lot of fear around intense exercise with PCOS, and there really doesn't need to be. If you're someone who, insulin resistance is a really big problem for you, then, doing high intensity interval training a few times a week may actually be the best thing for you. And, I'm not an exercise trained exercise certified anything. Um, but, like, when I'm referring to HIIT, I'm referring to it, in its truest sense, which is like 10 1-minute intervals where you're going hard for 1 minute, slow for 1 minute, hard for 1 minute, and that's it. Like, the studies that show the benefits of HIIT are on that sort of regimen with like 5-minute warm up, 10 intervals, 5-minute cool down. So, like, in, out, quick as possible. Um, it's the sort of like long, hard, intense endurance kind of stuff. I think of like Orange Theory, kind of like boot camp crazy classes where you're just going hard for like an hour plus sometimes. I think that can be too stressful. I think the most important thing when it comes to exercise and like what type works best for you is to listen to your own body. You know, if you are working out and you come home and you need a 2-hour nap after you worked out because you're just wiped out, that was probably too hard. Like, you should feel more energized after a workout. And that's been one of the best parts about having the bike. I'm 100% in it for the mood boost. It's like, I'm going to get on so I have more energy tonight. And it works every time, because I'm not going so hard. It's like, I'll get on for a half hour or 35 minutes.
Lovely,
Stop
lovely.
before it becomes a problem. My big
Oh,
thing. Yeah.
okay. So now we have reached our final question. Do you have any tips for staying positive and avoiding the why me mindset? It's so hard to love and trust my body when something's not working properly.
Yeah, it's hard, for sure. You know, don't do it by yourself, like find a support community. Um, that's one of the things that I love about the course is the Facebook group that goes along with it because the women are so supportive of each other. There's absolutely zero shame in professional help. And my my personal therapist is fantastic. She would always say, like, it's really easy to get caught up in that why me and it's so unfair and this and that. And it's like, well, whoever told you that life was supposed to be fair? Like, where did you get that expectation from? So just realizing it's like, oh, this is just, what it is. And I think it's important to maybe really hard where you are, depending on where you are at the moment, to jump straight into self love. Where it's just like, I just love everything about myself. Self love can be a big jump from where you are. So, work on self acceptance first and just, accepting the way that things are and befriending your body and asking it what it needs. Like it's really good at telling you what it needs. The problem is we ignore it, and I hear that a lot, in terms of like people who schedule their whole work schedule around their menstrual cycles, um, where people are like beating themselves up that they're a little slower the week of their period or they're a little more tired or they're craving more carbs, and it's like that's just the natural like ebb and flow of our bodies. And I always say, like with men, every day is Groundhog Day. Like their hormones are on a 24-hour cycle. So it's like every day is the same. For us, we really are on a month-long cycle. So, knowing that, being more compassionate with yourself when you do need more rest or don't have as much energy, knowing that in exactly 2 weeks, you're going to be bursting with energy. It's kind of the same as like eating seasonally and things like that. Like I'm try to be like in tune with nature, and it's a lot of people are like beating themselves up at this time of year because they're craving all the warm, hearty comfort foods. Um, of course you are. Like it's cold. You're not going to want a smoothie or a salad right now. But I guarantee you in July, you are not going to want like a big bowl of hot steaming pasta, you know. So it's just part of nature. everything's everything's what it's supposed to be, right?
Oh, I love that answer because it's real. It's so real. Like you really don't have to make the jump to loving yourself, and maybe people need to even reframe what that means because like I love my husband, but that doesn't mean I'm like enamored with him every second of the day. Like there are moments where I'm like, no. And that's kind of the relationship that you might have with your body. Like you're committed to it, but there are moments where maybe you're not fluttery butterflies about it, you know?
Yeah, it's also, the whole thing about you're not your body too. So, we're more than just a body in space. I know when we talk about your best friends or your girlfriends, and what you love about them, you are never ever going to say I love her tiny waist. Like it's just not something that you would say. You would say I love how kind she is, I love how funny she is. So we're remembering that about ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm sure after hearing you speak, if they are not already following you, everyone's going to want to follow you. So, where can they learn more about you? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, on Instagram's really the place where I am the most, and there I am the dot hormone dot dietitian with a T. That's the American spelling. Um, the website is the same, thehormonedietitian.com. So you can find I have a bunch of articles there and freebies, and I do have a quiz you can take to figure out what your root cause is. I have a book. I have a cookbook. It's called A Balanced Approach to PCOS, and so it really is just very balanced meals that are blood sugar balancing, anti-inflammatory, gut supporting, hormone supporting without cutting out any foods at all. There's cheese in the cookbook.
Yes.
There's a little bit of cheese. Yeah, yeah.
Love it. I love it. Okay. So do you have any upcoming courses, events, anything like that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I have a 6 week self study course called the PCOS Root Cause Roadmap, which goes through all of the root causes, how to identify and address your root causes. And I was so excited. We did 3 rounds last year in 2020, and I was so excited for the third round. We were able to bring you in. So Kendra has done 6 yoga videos that pair one with each of the modules in the course, and they really, align nicely. And I've gotten such good feedback from the people who've taken your classes within the course. And the exciting news for 2021 is that the course is open. You can enroll at any time. So I'm sure Kendra will drop her links for you. For how to get there. You do want to do my free webinar. I have a free masterclass that I'm running called PCOS Period Success. And that's the only way to get the extra special discount off the course.
We like discounts.
Who doesn't like it?
Yes, I will make sure to link to everything down in the description box below. So thank you so much for being here, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.